we have Brian O'Day, the author of Hi. I have it here.
Yeah, there's another one.
Yeah, that one.
This is the American version.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I ordered this from the library because the copy that you
Oh, you did?
gave me, I think I lent it to a mentor in BC.
And you never get them back.
Yeah, I don't know that I got it back.
Yeah.
So I met you years ago when you were a TV producer, and you were
Yeah.
doing, I don't know if you still are, but you were doing a show with Kevin O'Leary from Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. And at the time, I remember, and I don't know if I remember this correctly, you were invited on Oprah, but you weren't allowed into the US at that time. Like, you were just starting to do your paperwork. So I don't know where to start with this. You are someone who how about you just share, can you share a bit of your backstory of how you became a TV producer after having this very international drug smuggling business?
Oh, well, you know, the last deal I did was $250 million in value on a wholesale market. And we pulled it off with the DEA looking at us, basically. So that was an interesting event that I wrote about. And when I got out of prison, I was able to attract some attention through the story. And part of that was I wrote an ad that appeared in the Financial Post in 2001, I believe it was. Gosh, that long ago, huh? And it was at a time in my life where I'd been losing money in the stock market. I hadn't been making any money. I wasn't working per se. And so I was just trying to figure out what to do. And my wife said to me, "Why don't you get a job?" And I said, "Get a job, right? Who's going to hire me?" And she said, "Are you kidding me? You mean to tell me that you guys did $250 million with the DEA looking at you and pulled off a drug deal and you don't know how to do anything? Write a resume." So I sat down and wrote what ultimately became an ad that I put in the Financial Post, a classified ad. And the ad had a headline, "Former Marijuana Smuggler." And it went through having recently completed a 10-year sentence for smuggling 75 tons of marijuana into the United States, I now seek a legal means to support my family. And I listed some of the attributes I gained at that time. And anyway, my life blew up, as you can imagine. And I was a guest on a late night talk show. And there was an actor who was a guest on the show at the same time. I'd never met him before. And it was a good show, and that was that. 2 days later, I was in my local coffee shop, and there was that guy, that actor, standing right there getting a coffee. And I went, "What are the chances of that? I've been coming in here every day for 10 years. And here you are, we just met." He said, "I've been coming in here every day for 10 years too." And so it was interesting.
Wow.
He introduced me to these people from the US, this guy who had done a pilot for a show, and he was pitching it around. And he asked me, did I have any contacts in that world? And I said I did. A friend of mine actually had a pretty good job at one of the networks. So they gave me a copy of the pilot that they had done. And it was good. It was good. It was called American Mystery Tour, a travelogue for X-Files fans. And basically it was a travel show for paranormal and UFO and Bigfoot kind of fans. They did a great job, and we got a show with it.
Wow.
Well, that's how I got in the business right there. Baptism of fire. I got thrown in the thing. I was the only one who had any money or access to money. And because we had to produce these things and not get paid for them, we had to make it all work. And I was able to do that. And so, I became the executive producer of this series that was called Creepy Canada, and ultimately sold around the world in over 60 countries, called Creepy. And then I did a few other things. Did as you say, Redemption Inc. with Kevin O'Leary. I had a certain expertise in two areas, interestingly enough, for that show. That show was about bringing 10 ex-cons together to compete through various iterations. And one of them would end up with O'Leary as their partner. I had produced television and been involved with television, and I had been involved in the ex-con world, being one myself. So I got to co-host that and co-produce it with Proper Television. And with Kevin, we had a lot of fun. That was a very expensive show, but it was a lot of fun to do. Did a documentary called How to Make Money Selling Drugs, which it was just an extraordinary experience and just an amazing documentary. If any of your viewers haven't seen it, it's well worth a watch.
Wow. So you're originally from Newfoundland.
I am.
And your dad owned a brewery.
He did.
So although you ended up being like an international drug smuggler, what lessons growing up in that environment with your dad and running this business, what kind of lessons do you feel like stayed with you as you grew up and kind of became more independent?
Oh, I when you ask me that, the first thing that occurs to me is that you just do whatever it takes. You just keep showing up and showing up and showing up until it works or it spits you back out. And I think that's probably says something about me. If you read my book, you'll read a lot of failure in there, and extreme failure. And success doesn't come one success after another. It takes a lot of failures, failure after failure after failure. And just fail better every time, fail up. Sorry. Anyway, I lost my train of thought with that phone call. I apologize. Just let me turn that off. Can I, this is, seems.
You can take it.
Hello? Yes. Oh, thanks, buddy. I already got it taken care of, but thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Okay. I gotta turn this off. Okay. Sorry about that.
Don't worry. So to get a sense for the people that don't know anything about this area, this industry, how much in total, like you said, 75 tons was the last bunch or the last block. How much in total did you bring in? Was it to North America throughout the course of your entire experience?
Yeah, to North America. You know, not a whole lot more than 75 tons. That was a massive deal. That was the biggest deal ever.
Yeah.
And it was unheard of. You know, up until then, we were doing a couple of tons, 3 tons, 5 tons. The plane had 16,000 pounds, 8 tons,
Wow.
that kind of thing. 75 tons was like, people said, are you fucking crazy? 75 tons, really? And but we split it. It took a year, you know, from one. We split it into two, and it took a year to put together the second part of the load. The entire period of which they were watching us, which we
Wow.
didn't. And it
what's
wasn't.
the street, like, what's the street value of that?
I don't know. The wholesale value is $250 million, 250 million.
Yeah.
That's wholesale. I don't know what, you know, how they anticipate it'd be over $1 billion anyway, street value.
Yeah.
For what that's worth, I have no idea.
So something I really wanted to ask you about was, now that in Canada, marijuana is so legal and there's all these stores with all the candy, and like, I remember when a place opened up in the annex, there was a big lineup from, like, all these young people were lining up to go check out what was in there. How does that feel now that you've gone through all of this in your lifetime, you've served a prison sentence, and now it's like this big thing where there's all these like shareholders, you know, jumping in who would have previously wanted to throw you in jail? Like, what does that feel like?
I can tell you exactly what that feels like and what it's felt like. I preface it by saying that I've completely gotten over my anger about it, because I just look at it and go, you know, that's fucking humanity for you right there. But I feel like what the Indians must have felt like when the white man showed up over here. You know, there were millions of them. They had enterprise. They had enterprise between each other, between groups. They had a lot going on, and they had a life. Some rulers sent over pirate-like guys, because they were the only people who would sail the seas in those days, were pirate-like guys, people who seconded as pirates besides working for the kings or queens of Europe to go create empire elsewhere. And they came over here and fucking took everything. They were sent over. They took the enterprise for themselves and disposed of the Indians as second class, third class, disposable people. We built the enterprise. We built it. We built it. We didn't fire a shot building it. We had a wonderful time with each other building it. People just wanted to smoke a little pot. You know what I mean? And we were just a bunch of guys and girls who just liked doing what we were doing, and got locked up for 10 years for that on the last one, 2 years on a previous one. And but, you know, we were experts in that world in every way. Well, the moment that they decided they were going to legalize this thing, and they put a former police chief of fucking Toronto in charge of the file federally, you knew the jig was up. All of the enterprise, and they kept locking up people who stood on the front lines trying to get it to be legal.
Right.
So the enterprise was taken over. It was taken over by major corporate shareholders, major corporations. Fucking Constellation Brands comes in and puts $5 billion into Canopy. Canopy's never going to sell $5 billion worth of pot in its entire life, ever. You know what I mean? What the heck? So it turned it into a stock play and turned people with criminal records into pariahs who couldn't even get a job in the industry. If I wanted to get a job in the Canadian industry, I can because I have a pardon. But if I didn't have a pardon, I couldn't even get a job of work in this business. So it's different in the United States. They have social justice programs that are focusing on bringing people out of prison into this industry. But, you know, I told you I lost all my hostility, but I think I had a little bit going on right there. I just feel like, fuck them. Fuck them all. They're, you know, what can I say? The hypocrisy, the bullshit, the theft of an enterprise that we built, a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that we built, have it stripped from us and have us put out with a big sign on our backs. Okay. I got the fuck you.
Yeah. I saw an interview with you on CNN when you were a correspondent, and it was a long time ago before pot became legalized in Canada. And I saw like the interviewer when you said like drugs should be legalized in general.
All drugs.
And for anyone who doesn't know watching, like you're a drug counselor. So it's like you've worked with all of these people who are recovering addicts. And so it's like when you said that, I saw them push back so strong on what you were saying, that it should be legal. And then now it's like, now everyone's like, rah, rah, and, you know, just like trying to get investors and trying to like sell it in a really like positive light. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And here's the latest that really gets me. Oh my God. I can't tell you how much this gets me. There's a move afoot in the industry now to have people stop calling it weed.
Oh, okay.
The industry doesn't want it to be called weed anymore, or pot. They want it to be called cannabis. You know what? Come here. Let me get my hands on you, you fucking idiots. They completely disregard the entire presence of this beautiful plant. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Don't call it
So
weed.
when you were when you were young and someone said that they had a friend in England, like when you first started out, and because Toronto prices were kind of high, you hopped on a plane to England.
Yeah.
And what did it feel like going to the airport and having yourself like strapped with whatever you were bringing back? Like, how did that feel walking into the airport and doing that first time?
You know, it's a little bit of a rush, but look, here's the key to longevity and survival in that world, as far as I could tell. And I'll tell you a story that relates to this. The key to longevity and survival is to make a decision to do something and then just fucking do it and don't think about it ever again. Or make a decision not to do it and don't think about it ever again. It's the thinking that screws everything up. Pericles, Act 1, Scene 1, that it is known is well enough. What grows more known grows worse to smother it. That's a Shakespeare play, an incredible line that says exactly that. The moment you are confronted with a situation, you instinctively know, go, don't go. You know it instantly. But the moment the thought enters the knowing, you no longer know because you begin to think then.
Right.
And when you think it could be or it couldn't be, you're not sure. So my thing was to go with the knowing and So strap up and go to the airport and don't think about it. Because if you think about it, when you get to the airport, you're going to be a fucking mess. You will never get through customs. So here's a little thinking thing. I went to prison in 1972 for a couple of pounds of hash. Never saw it in my life, but I got convicted for it. Anyway, when I got out, I had a business card that I met this guy in Montreal before I went to prison. He was from Colombia. And he gave me, it wasn't even a business card. It was a card, all right, but he wrote on the back of it his name and the address of a restaurant in Bogota, Colombia. And he said, if you can ever get to Bogota, go to this restaurant. They'll know where I am. So when I got out of prison, I figured, fuck it, I'm going. So I didn't have any money. I got $500 and a ticket to Bogota and flew to Bogota. Couldn't speak Spanish, but I figured I can speak French pretty good. I can figure it out. Spanish sounds like French. Got down there, couldn't even order a beer. You know, went in beer, pointed at a beer, and the guy said, "Ah, cerveza." And I knew I was in trouble. I just was going to have a hard time here. Anyway, I went to this restaurant across town, way across Bogota. It was 10 miles across town. And it was boarded up, closed, out of business. And I'm standing out front. It's all gated in front and a long driveway leading down to where the restaurant is. And I'm going, I cannot believe this. What the hell am I going to do? And behind the restaurant was a little building that I could see with smoke coming out of a chimney. So I just started shaking on the gates and shouting. And this little old guy, must have been 100 years old, comes walking up to the gate. And I had the card in my hand with the guy's name on it. And I said, Benny, so-and-so, you know Benny? And the guy, you know, basically told me he didn't know anything. So I said, okay, wait. And I wrote my name and my hotel, my room number on it, and gave it to this guy. Said, if you see Benny, give him this. And I walked away, figuring, okay, that's that. So I walked back across town. I was in my hotel that night, and a knock came on my door. And I opened up the door, and there was this little guy standing there, about 5'5", very slick down black hair, pencil thin mustache, had a crumpled up newspaper under his arm, and that note that I had written with my name and hotel. And he said, you? And I said, yeah, me. He looked in the room like this, and he motioned me to move in, and I moved in. And he put his newspaper down on the desk, and I could see the butt end of a gun sticking out of the newspaper. He couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Spanish. But he made it clear to me to stay where I was. He would be back. And he left, and he came back the next day with a guy who could speak English. They wanted to know what I wanted and what I was doing there. And I told him, Benny told me if I ever, he said, well, Benny's busy right now working for me. I can take care of whatever it is. And I said, well, I wanted to get some coke to bring back to Canada. And he said, sure, how much money do you have? And I told him I had $500. Well, I had to pick him up off the floor. He was just, couldn't believe that someone would come down and try and do a deal. This is a guy who's, you know, moves millions of dollars worth of product, and I'm down here with $500. But after he stopped laughing, he said, man, you got a whole lot of balls. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to give you 50 grams of coke, which he did. He said, I know what you can do with that back in Canada. You go back and sell it for $5 grand, 10 grand if you cut it. Come back here with $5 grand and we'll do some business. So I took that 50 grams and I had a pack of cigarettes this is my idea, took a pack of cigarettes and took a hot pin and heated it with a lighter and opened the cellophane on the bottom with the hot pin so that the seal, the stamp wasn't broken. And I pulled the cigarettes out of the cellophane, took the cigarettes out, put the coke in, fit perfectly like it was made for it, put it back in, seal the seal up, and I can call the cab to take me to the airport in Bogota.
Wow.
Well, I thought I did a little coke. And then I did a little more, and then I started fucking thinking, okay, that was a mistake. So I thought, I can't do that. That's too simple. So I ran downstairs, bought a carton of cigarettes, brought it upstairs, opened the carton the same way with the hot pin on the opening, the glue, took it out, put the cigarettes in the middle of the carton, sealed it all back up, got in the cab, go to the airport. Halfway to the airport, I start to panic. Cocaine makes you think like a dog. You know, you should never do coke. So I thought, I can't do that. So I opened the carton, took the pack out, and put it in my pocket. Put it in my pocket with the pack of cigarettes that I was actually smoking. So there's all the thinking. Here's where the no thinking comes in right now to save my ass. I get to the airport and I get pulled in by customs leaving Bogota. And they pull me downstairs and they're getting my suitcases off out of the plane, and they want me to strip naked. And I'm fucking going nuts. So I'm a man, you're a man, and I'm playing on the whole macho thing, and they're saying, so sorry, but take your fucking clothes off. So I'm going crazy and ripping my clothes off and throwing them at them. And when it comes time to take my jacket off, I had the Coke cigarettes and the regular cigarettes in my pocket. So these were the days when you smoked everywhere, okay?
Yeah.
I took cigarettes out of my pocket and I opened it, and I had the Coke cigarettes in my hand like this, and I had the cigarettes I was smoking on top of it that I rolled open and took one out and lit it and offered them. These are cops in those days were making $30 a month, okay? So I offered each of them a cigarette, which they each took. They did. And I lit them, and I'm complaining and throwing my clothes at them, holding the cigarettes, and they give me back all my clothes. But I get something back. I put my hand back in my pocket with my cigarettes, and I leave and get on the plane and fly to Miami and get in. So with no problem, and then go back to Canada and sell it. So, you know, the thinking almost got me destroyed.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine once asked me, how do you never get busted? And I said, because I don't think about a single thing I do. And when I said that, this was the third day of a coke run. We were standing in her kitchen, hadn't been asleep for 3 days. On her kitchen counter was the complete works of Shakespeare. I flipped it open, and that's when I read that it is known as well enough. What grows more known grows worse to smother it. I read it right then and there. It was so coincidental. Anyway, there you go, thinking.
So what made you transition from coke to marijuana?
I only did coke to get back in the pot business. Coke is a small little thing, and I could manage little small quantities of it and have a lot of cash from it. But I was using that to get back into the pot business, which is exactly what I did.
Right. So you, for the viewers, you ended up having a coke overdose, and you were pronounced dead when they found you. And I think it said you were like 8 days in after getting this package of coke.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? That overdose happened, that you were pronounced dead, that you came back? Like when you came back, what did you feel like? What was going through your mind?
So, okay. I have to tell you what happened when I went out, basically, to get to what was going through my mind. So I had an experience, it seemed to me, when I passed out, um, that I was given a choice of living or dying. I don't know where the choice came from or anything like that. You know, I can't tell you anything about anything other than very plainly, I felt I was given a choice of living or dying. But if I was to choose living, I had to do it all differently. Otherwise, I could just die. But the choice was completely mine. So I chose living, and boom, bam, back I came. And I came back with, I can remember so distinctly, Mala, the day that this happened. I walked in front of the mirror and saw myself and got frightened by myself, what I saw. Been 8 days, no sleeping, 8 days of just drinking and snorting coke and smoking cigarettes. And I asked myself, what would I do if I didn't do this, though? I mean, what would I do? Of course I got to do this. And so I could not stop. I could not find a way to stop. I had two gorgeous children and a wife who loved me. I had everything going for me, and I couldn't fucking stop, and couldn't find a reason or a way even with all of that. And then it blew up. And when I came to, the desire to use cigarettes, tobacco, alcohol, all of it was completely taken from me. Most people I met go through all kinds of internal machinations trying to quit. When it hit me, it was like the quitting train came in, and all that shit jumped on it, and it took off out of town. And by the time I came to, I couldn't even see it. What a blessing. Most people don't have that kind of blessing. And when I watch people who actually struggle and can't get it, I understand. And I feel so fortunate. My son, and he won't mind me breaking his anonymity, God bless him, he's a beautiful guy, Cheyenne, who has 8 years this year, I think, maybe even 9. You know, he couldn't get it for years, but finally one day, and his thing was opiates. And you get hooked on those in a way, like Coke. When you stop doing Coke, even if you're doing it every day for 20 years, it's like a relief. But when you stop doing heroin, it's not a relief. It's a problem. And when it was finally taken from him, it was a complete solution too. You know, he didn't struggle. He just flew right out of it, and got sober, and he hasn't looked back. So,
what was it like becoming a rehab counselor and then getting busted by the DEA and FBI? And like, what was it like to be spied on and like have your life cleaned up and then get arrested?
Okay. When we pulled that deal off and the DEA hit our boats and didn't even find a fucking cigarette paper on our 3 ships when they knew we had 50 tons of pot, and they fucking did not like that. I knew, and I got to think any sane individual would know right then and there, we haven't heard the last of this. You know, they spent millions of dollars watching everything we did for a year. And there were 110 of us that they were trying to keep their eyes on. Wow. So, yeah. And we were all over the world. As they say, the sun never set on our business. And so those guys had massive, I'd say jobs were lost over that. Massive egg on face. It was really terrible. So I knew it was coming. The hammer was going to fall at some point. But you know what? When I got sober, I lost the fear. that went with all of that. And I got to, believe it or not, the most wonderful I have ever felt about myself was in the time from when I got sober on September 1st, 1988, until I went to prison. And I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Wow.
But my life was unbelievably good.
And what was it like? Like, I saw somewhere that your sentence was 10 years, but the process, all of the stuff that you have to go through was like 14 years. So
Yeah.
what is that? What was that like for you? And what was it like socially? What was it like emotionally?
Prison was a pain in the ass, and I was a miserable patient. Writing saved my life, basically. I started, like, when I went to prison, I had a lot of people in the community that didn't think that I should be gone, because I was a sober guy working in a drug and alcohol rehab with recovering alcoholics and addicts, turned my life around completely. And they said, what is the point? So there were like over 100 and something people wrote 17 different individuals, from the president of the United States to the prosecutor in my case, and the cops prosecuting my case as well. The district attorneys, the secretary of justice, whatever he's called, all 17 of these people got 100 and something letters. And eventually my prosecutor in my case, who at first thought I was bullshit, I became his favorite person. And, he made it possible for me to get transferred to Canada, where they let me out of prison. And if he hadn't, he held the key on that, and I didn't cooperate. And normally you have to cooperate to get it transferred to a place where they know you're going to get out. In the US, I would have to stay in for 8.5 years. In Canada, I could get out after 1/6 of my sentence. Now, I didn't get out after 1/6, but I got out after less than 8.5 years. But then they made me spend 2 years in a halfway house, which was funky, but there it is. It's all. How was it? It was prison in Terminal Island. I had a lot of fun. Had some good buddies in there. We had a great time. It was split up into cliques. The Cubans hung together. The Colombians hung together, although the Colombians kind of intermingled with what some people not so affectionately call the jet set, which was us, the guys who were the pot smugglers. And we all kind of had our crew that we hung with, basically. Yeah. And that was that. When I got there, I was frightened to death. But very quickly, word got out, because I walked in by myself, and they shut the yard down to walk me across the yard, getting in there. And word spread quickly that there's a Canadian drug smuggler just arrived on the yard. Well,
and you pressed the button, right? Like, you rang the bell?
That's right. I did. Terminal Island. Google Terminal Island Prison, Long Beach. It's not a great place. Although it's right in the middle. We had cruise ships parked right alongside us, looking at the prisoners all the time. It was crazy. Wow. It's an island built in Long Beach, in Los Angeles Harbor.
So, touching on that, or like, I don't know how this is to describe, but what is it like to go from like having a plane and an island and a fleet of trucks, and like you're doing business, I think, in Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean, Alaska? Like, what is it like to have such an international life involving so many people and so many trips, and then being confined to a small space where now all that stuff becomes your memory? it becomes your history and your memory. How do you physically adjust to that, like that
In prison, you
drastic
mean?
change?
In prison? Are you talking about prison?
Yeah.
Well, for me, it took writing because I had to get out of my mind. My mind, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, radio station KFUK, K-fuck. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's what happens when I think. And so what I quickly realized, and I mean, the moment I walked into J Unit to look for my bed and saw a piece of paper and a pencil, just a torn out of a book piece of paper and a broken piece of pencil, I realized the moment I saw that this was going to save me right there. And I grabbed that piece of paper and pencil, and that's when I started to write. And, you know, I wrote almost 3,000 pages in there of shit that became that book that you've got right there, or that you had. It took me out of my thinking mind. It put me in my project mind.
I saw that when you met your wife, you were in the middle of this, like all this big lifestyle, and you met her when you were staying at, is it Neil Young's house?
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was back in the early 70s. That was my second wife.
That's your second wife. And then you like took a break from this lifestyle. How does a person in the worlds that you've been in, how do you have relationships and family, and like what does that feel like, and what is that experience like for you to be married, to have children, and to be going through all of these like very like moving parts that seem to clash to a regular person? They would seem to clash. How do you kind of live all of it?
Just do. I mean, that's my life.
Yeah.
I live in it. And anyone who comes for the ride, that's what they get. But they see it before they get in the car. They see how the car goes. And, you know, eventually it became too much for every one of them. And the common denominator in all of it was me. Well, I could point my finger at them being the problem. I have to look at that I am the common denominator in each of those things that went wrong. And so, you know, if I'm looking, I can only look for my part. My knee jerk is to be able to tell you every fucking thing that you have done wrong, that I am right. But let me tell you a little story about right and the need to be right. So when I first got sober, my wife left me. You know, she sent the kids up to see me in hospital with an envelope. And I opened the envelope, and in it was a key and an address. And the address was for a place in a little town called La Conchita, which was about 15 miles outside Santa Barbara, but it wasn't back in LA where I lived. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what's this? And I called her, and, you know, she said, I don't want you coming home. I rented that place for you. That's it. So, you know, I just was nonlinear. But anyway, went through it, got in the place, etc. And, you know, struggling and talking on the phone and hanging up and arguing, hanging up, and you don't know, you're wrong, Matt, back and forth like this all the time. So I was visiting this friend of mine one day, George Buffano, who was a psychiatrist actually. And I was kvetching about how she just didn't get it. And George said, Brian, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And I said, what's that? He said, I'm right all the time. And I said, what? He said, I'm right all the time. And so are you. And so is she. Isn't that interesting? That she can be right all the time, and so can you, and you both disagree. How's that possible? I have my life experience, and you have yours. And we're both looking at exactly the same thing, but seeing it differently. Why? Because we have different life experiences. So when you say to me, no, 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 you don't get it. That's not it's this, not that. You're saying to me, your life experience doesn't count. Mine does. And that is not right. So my suggestion to you is to hold your rightness gently. Always be prepared to change with new information. And I went, oh, fuck. Okay. So I left, and I'm going back to the house. Actually, I'm going to a friend's house in Montecito. And on the way, I stop at a bookstore called Earthling Bookstore. It's no longer there, but this bookstore filled with great books, spiritual books. If you're working on yourself, this was where you'd go to look for stuff to help support your work. And I bought this book, which was an unusual book for me to buy, because normally I wouldn't buy a book like this, but I did because I thought I would write, called 10,000 Proverbs and Quotations. Okay, this is Santa Barbara, California. I take this 10,000 Proverbs and Quotations, and I go to my friend's house in Montecito, and she's not there. And I'm in the kitchen at the table, and I have a book on the table, and I call her. Again. And I, in hostility, flip open the book I just bought. This is what I read the moment I opened the page. This is the grave of Mike O'Day, who died maintaining his right of way. His right was clear, his will was strong, but he's just as dead as if he'd been wrong. Honest to God, it was like lightning hit the page. My work was pointed out to me in an instant. Who died maintaining his right of way. So, you know, that's the second time a book delivered the message to me. Like the first time was when I discovered the Pericles quote, that it is known as well enough. And then this time with 10,000 Proverbs and Quotations. And O'Day spelled O''T''E', like my name is spelled. I have an Uncle Mike as well, but you know, just the fact that it was O'Day and right of way, and his right was clear and his will was strong, but he's just as dead as if he'd been wrong. So, you know, that was a massive, one of those massive gifts for me in life, because ever since then, every time I need to be right, I know it. I never knew it before, but now at least I know it. And once I know it, I can let it go. But if I don't know it, I'm not busy letting anything go. You know what I mean? So it gives me another touchstone for work. It's good.
This is like super personal, but I saw you talk about it publicly. So how, like being a man who to some men have lived this kind of like super alpha male lifestyle. Like I remember when I was a kid, Scarface was one of my favorite movies. And like, you know, there's just this kind of Hollywood portrayal of what people might project onto your history. And I saw you like open up about like sexual trauma, childhood sexual trauma. What is that like to be a man and to have had the life, like type of life that you've had, and then open up about that, like publicly? What is that like with your family, with people asking you about it, that it's so personal? And yeah, just how has that
Okay.
process been?
So why did I open up about it? Let's talk about that first of all, okay?
Okay.
I was in Santa Barbara, and the orphans in Newfoundland from Mount Cashel Orphanage were fighting the Christian Brothers. And claiming that they had been abused. Now, I lived across the road, like right across our field. We had a farm. Right across our field was Mount Cashel Orphanage. And I used to play with the guys over there all the time. We used to go run in the field and play cowboys and Indians and do that. We did growing up together. That's what we did.
Yeah.
What was the point? Sorry, I lost my train of thought right there.
Why you opened up? Like you said, that's where you wanted to start.
So sorry, yes. So they were taking the Christian Brothers to court and suing them. And a friend of mine who is a member of parliament, I think he's still a member of parliament, was their lawyer. I went to school with this guy. We were in class together, the lawyer for the Christian Brothers, the lawyer for the orphans. The lawyer for the Christian Brothers was my cousin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was my first lawyer when I went to prison in 1972, but he was a lawyer for the brothers. Mm-hmm. So the brothers were saying, no, this wasn't true. And the head of the brothers, he was being accused of sending known pedophiles that were taken from other schools all to the orphanage. When they got discovered, send them over to Mount Cashel, get them out of the way and put them, because, you know, the orphans over there don't have parents to complain about anything. Right. So the brother in charge said, no, this is not true. That was not the case. This wasn't happening. The brother in charge was the guy that fucked with me. So I got in touch with the lawyer out there and said, hey, maybe you might want to talk to me. So we had a conversation. And he said, would you be willing to come and testify? And I said, fucking totally, buddy. And I hadn't joined any lawsuits ever, okay? And a bunch of people have sued and done this. I've never done any of that. So he called my cousin and he said, hey, well, if you're going to put that guy on the stand to say that he didn't know anything about the people he was sending there being pedophiles, then Brian, whom I think you know, is going to take the stand and talk about his experience with this guy. And so they settled after that. They settled. It was done. When I go, so I got out and I started speaking in schools. I just go talk about my life. And, you know, I don't pretend anything is anything that it isn't. And just tell the story and let the chips fall where they may. I thought in doing that, it was important to tell that story in the event as I looked out on the audience and saw the children that I was talking to. I wondered if any of these 11-year-olds that I'm looking at are going through what the 11-year-old me went through. So I tell that story just because they look to me like I'm some big superhero kind of guy, right? Some macho suit. And I tell that story and I tell it and I say, and look, I not only survive standing up and sharing that out loud and in person publicly with you, but I thrive and it supports me. But then at the same time, I encourage that if it's never happened to you, don't make that story up, because to draw attention to yourself, find another way to do that, because people do that. And you know, it just, for people who are struggling with being able to say the words, when someone like me says the words, it sometimes makes it easier for them to do the same.
And did any of the adults like have a problem with you talking to kids about, like, the kids about it?
Nope.
Wow.
No. I got, as a matter of fact, the last big thing I did was the RCMP took me on a tour of Newfoundland. All, like I did, I think I did 14 gigs in 6 days, going from one school to another. It was just incredible. You know, it was a massive success in every place, even speaking in fundamentalist Christian schools. And, you know, I've spoken to over 5,000 kids at a time in LA, at big schools in LA. It's, I figure I've got maybe 50,000 kids under my belt, maybe a little more.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Lucky.
what is, like, when you were recovering, like, or during that process, and you started, like, did you talk about this when you were, did you do therapy in recovery, or did you, like,
Oh, yeah.
go through that process? And
yeah.
And then did you
So
talk
I
about
did.
it then?
I did. It was the first time I ever spoke about it, and my this was when I first tried to get sober in 1984. I finally came back in 88 and got sober, but in 84. And yes, I talked to it. My psychiatrist said, "So what did your parents say?" And I said, "I've never told them." And he said, "See, there's the problem right there. You are protecting your parents from that information, whereas it was your parents' job to protect you from that activity. So you need to stop protecting them and tell this story, because I'm sure this contributes to everything that causes you to stumble." So I phoned my parents and told them. Like, and my mother's response was, "You are a brave little boy, dear." I was 40 years old when I phoned her and told her, and that was her response.
Wow.
That's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. And then how long after you went through that particular trauma did you notice an increase in drug and alcohol use?
After when I was a kid?
Yeah.
Not really. Well, I just began that when that happened as a kid. My biggest problem was God thing, right? I was afraid of God because I knew God was plotting to put me in hell at any minute. I drank. I would steal booze from my father, who had all of the alcohol in the world, my mother, all the time.
Yeah.
What can I say? All the time. But I was never an alcoholic per se, in that I never pined for drinking when I didn't have a drink.
Yeah.
But when I could get my hands on it, I drank the living shit out of it, right to blackout.
Yeah.
And then, when I discovered LSD, the drinking went away, and it was just acid and pot and that kind of thing. And, while I did drink occasionally after that, not much until cocaine. And then I drank only to keep the edge off the coke.
Yeah.
It's too intense to do. The way I did it, you had to drink.
And what was it about coke that, why was that a stronger experience for you personally? What did it make you feel that was different?
What was it in me that drew me to coke. I don't know, but there was a certain something in the anticipation of doing it that drew me to it. It certainly wasn't the fucking doing of it, because the moment I did it, it was all downhill from there for days, you know, until I go out of it, until I would run out and just, you know, stop calling the dealer to get more. But, you know, that's 5, 6, 7 days away for every time I start it. But the anticipation of getting it when I didn't have it, and I was feeling good having recovered from my last binge.
Yeah.
Something in that anticipation drew me to it.
And after so many years working with people who are recovering, what are some patterns or themes that you've noticed that, like, what are some patterns and themes when people actually fully come back, or what are some patterns and themes where when people are kind of have like a lifelong struggle? Do you see like patterns and themes with both recovering and then or having a lifelong struggle that you've noticed?
Confucius say man cannot save face and ass at the same time. Okay. A lot of these addicts have a big face somehow, you know, though they are destroying themselves, and they cannot save their ass as a result. There's a sense of grandiosity in addiction as well, and a sense and an ability to justify, unparalleled ability to justify the behavior. Once we have to justify anything, we're doing the wrong thing. Simply are. So that's a hint for me in my life, is if I'm rationalizing or justifying anything, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. So and you know, the older I get, the more unwilling I become to ignore the signals. Yeah. Not enough time left to be ignoring signals. Just got to keep showing up.
And when someone that you've worked with, because when you described your recovery, it's like very unique for people to hit their saturation point. So when you've worked with people that are able to recover in front of you, what is it that they download? What is it that they seem to like? What shift have you witnessed in that process?
What shift? You know, once you become willing to own your behavior and the fallout from it, that's a massive thing. To come to the realization that the guilt you feel is only a feeling if you do not feel it anymore. If you continue to feel guilty, that's a slippery sliding place for you to go back out the door. And it's not a feeling, it's a choice. Because guilt, like everything else, has a beginning and a middle and an end. If it persists, I'm choosing it. Why am I choosing it? Because I'm using it. And I'm using it to escape back to where I came from. So I, you know, confront that and realize everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything. If something is persisting, it's because it's my choice. And, here's another thing. Here's one of the most important things that I think I've ever learned, and only learned recently, is that my problems are nothing that I don't think they are. That is massive for me to come to that opens up all of life to me. My problems are nothing that I don't think they are. So it's the thinking. If I can shut that thinker down, I have a chance. If that thinker wants me to think about my problems, wants me to think them into a corner, you know what I mean? But whatever problems I may have or perceive as problems, I don't need to be thinking about. If I am to think about anything, I must always think of solutions, not problems. But, I don't even think of solutions either. I have to look at where the chips have fallen and deal with that. That's it. It's the present. It's all right here. Everything I need. None of it. As they say, the past is history, the future is mystery. It's not called the present for nothing. It's a gift. This is it. It has the solution to everything. It has the moment I've been looking for my whole life. I just have to realize that I'm in it. I spent most of my life looking for some other moment, you see, and that was a great realization too. Once I got a grip on the fact that if I'm always looking for another moment, I'm never going to be here. I'm always in quest of somewhere else. And here is the only place where what I need is. So I remind myself continually, I pull myself back from elsewhere where I'm looking. It's here.
What was the moment like when the FBI and the DEA came and you knew that it was over, you knew that the time had come? What was that moment like? What happened? What did it feel like?
I was lying in bed. I remember distinctly. I've told this story frequently, but this is my memory. I mean, I remember it clearly. I can see it as if it were yesterday. A guy from New York, I think he was from, tall, thin, gangly, heroin addict with hallucinations of terrible things happening, crawling the walls, this poor guy. And I sat with him at the hospital. Excuse me. I was lying in bed the next morning thinking about going to the hospital and sitting with this guy. I just love this stuff, I don't know why, but I just love to go there, and it feeds me and it helps keep me sober, I guess. As I'm lying there with my back behind me, over here is a door. And I'm lying there and a knock comes on the door, and I swear to God, without moving a muscle, I just knew exactly who was at that door. There's no question in my mind. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. The sun is shining. I roll over, and it's vertical blinds over window in the door. And I can see a gun in someone's hand through the vertical blinds. So I go, Mother of God. And I get up and put on my bathrobe and go open the door. And there are two guys standing there, both of them with guns in their hand. And one of them holds up a badge and his ID. And he said, "Are you Brian O'Day?" And I said, "I wish I wasn't, but I am." And he said, "I'm Gary Annunziata, and this is Greg someone or other, the DEA. May we come in?" And I said, "Well, you got the guns." And he said, "Do you have any guns in there?" And I said, "No, I don't." Says, okay, well, we're going to come in now. So they came in and they hit the radio. And the next thing you know, 8 more people came in.
Wow.
And so they got, it was an interesting moment. I knew the jig was up, but I knew the jig was going to be up at some point. And so here it was.